Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us, taking the time out of your day to be part of this webinar. I'm Mallory Price and will help to moderate this session. Thank you so much to those of you who submitted questions ahead of time to help us shape this webinar into what you most need to know. If you have questions during the presentations, please enter them into the questions tab on your control panel. We will get to as many as we can. This session is also being recorded and the presentation will be available on our website by tomorrow. Joining me today and most of our webinar is Mike Parkinson, founder of Billion Dollar Graphics. Mike is an APMP fellow and is a sought-after speaker, presenter, trainer, and consultant. He is the voice of best practices when it comes to incorporating powerful graphics into bids and proposals. So Mike, thank you so much for taking this time to be with us today.
I am super excited and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Also with us is Brad Douglas, Executive Vice President of Global Strategy for Shipley. Brad oversees Shipley's global operations and training, including the Shipley Certification Program. Brad, thank you for joining us as well.
You bet. Glad to be here. Thanks, Mallory.
All right, so we'll talk about our objective for this really quickly. So here is the objective for the webinar. We want you to understand how to apply proposal graphics, best practices to improve your probability of winning. That is our overall goal for today. And Brad, I will turn the mic over to you.
Okay, well, this kind of drills down into a little more detail of what Mallory just said. And Mallory, thanks for monitoring questions in the background. And these are the points here. You see 4 points on the left. Why graphics even matter in proposals, some types of graphics that we should consider, some of the best practice guidelines that Mike has learned in his interaction with companies and clients that we've learned. We're going to talk a little bit about action captions and success stories. We'll mention infographics, which was actually one of the questions submitted by one of you that signed in. The use of logos in proposals is kind of a big deal, something we might not think about. Shortcuts and tips, and Mike is wonderful at that and has a lot to share there. So we'll go through these and more points. But again, as Mallory said, thank you so much for submitting questions. It really helps us to put together a message that matters, that you're interested in learning about. So those of you that have joined other Shipley webinars, you've heard us mention these before. We've kind of tried to narrow down what really makes a winning proposal, a quality proposal. And there's really 7 common characteristics. So most of you have probably heard these before. Bottom line is compliance. We have to meet all the bid request requirements and answer them. Responsiveness is taking compliance to the next level. How do we actually address customers' issues and needs and hot buttons that may not be in any kind of solicitation document? Strategy. Are we making it obvious in our proposal response why our offer should be selected? Is it really obvious? Is there some strategic rationale for the evaluator to choose us? Does our proposal have competitive focus? Is it obvious why our offer should be chosen over the others that they're evaluating? The quality of writing, always important. Is it focused on the customer? Well organized, clear, correct. And then what we're focusing on today, and Mike, I'm so happy that you're willing to do this, is do our visuals and graphics clearly communicate our major selling points? If not, then they're irrelevant and they're fluff. And so that's what we're going to focus on, is that 7th characteristic there, graphics, the 6th one, and page design and document design is the last one. Are we visually appealing to the evaluator? Do the way we've laid out our graphics, our images, our text, our outline, is it all in line with making it easy to evaluate? So again, our laser focus today is going to be on the visualization. Do our graphics clearly communicate our selling points? You'll recognize this gentleman, Einstein, right? He said, if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough. And I think what Mike's going to share with us today is going to reinforce this very statement. If our readers and evaluators, if they're not getting it, in about, well, Mike will give us some rule of thumb, but we've got to make it clear. I mean, that's why we include graphics. So we will, one of the questions just came in. Yes, we will post these screenshots and slides on our website as well in PDF for you at a later date. So you'll be able to capture these as well. So Mallory, if you would please switch control of the slides over to Mike. I'm going to ask Mike if he'll take control and take over, and please submit questions as we go. You're up, Mike.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brad. Yes, please ask questions. You have a wonderful opportunity to pick our brains, and heck, if we don't have an answer, maybe someone else online will, because we're quite a large audience. Okay. So one of the secrets to all of this is putting ourselves, empathizing with our evaluator, our decision makers, and the reviewers. So for example, imagine you have 14 or let's say 5 different proposals to evaluate, and each proposal is 100 pages. So that works out to a lot of stuff you have to review. Which proposal would you rather evaluate, A or B? Go ahead and type it into chat if you want to. So imagine you have hundreds of pages to evaluate, and you want to be able to do it as efficiently as possible. Which would you rather evaluate, A or B? Mallory, are we seeing any people chime in?
They are all A, every
All
single
right.
one of them.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying graphics are better than text. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is decisions aren't just made based on the analytical part of our brain, that our emotional part of the brain and being efficient plays a major role. I get to speak on the topic and do training around the world. And I was giving one of my favorite keynotes I give is called At a Glance. We live in an at a glance society. And what I mean by that is people want their information as efficiently as possible because we are resource starved. The old ways of doing things don't work anymore. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. One of the rules of thumb that I follow is based on understanding how the brain works. So if we say, for example, we're the best of the best, our content, our graphics, our page layout, everything better corroborate that statement. If we say we're innovative, we better look like it, feel like it, sound like it, and taste like it. So if I were to ask you, and you can put it in the chat, does this graphic make the solution provider look like they're the best of the best? Yes or no? Does this look like the best of the best? What do you think? Mallory, out of curiosity, what do you think? Do you think this graphic makes the solution provider look like the best of the best?
I do not, and it looks like the audience agrees with me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lots of things are happening here that do not corroborate that point. Living in an at-a-glance society, if I were a reviewer, a decision maker, evaluator, and I looked at this, I would say, I'm certainly not feeling confident in your solution. Even though they may have the best solution, if they don't communicate it efficiently and effectively, that's a problem. So here, what I'd like you to do is pay very close attention to what you're about ready to see on your screen, and I'm going to ask you a very specific question. So pay very close attention, and we're going to uncover a North Star, a way to make sure that our content is always winning. Here we go. Okay, so based on what you just saw, what stood out most? Go ahead and type it in the chat. What stood out most? And there's a very good reason I'm asking you this, rather what may seem like a silly question, but there's a really good reason. Mallory, what are we seeing in the chat window?
The lion is standing out most to everyone.
Absolutely. So there was always a saying when I was growing up, and that is that content is king. It is no longer king. Content is table stakes. If you do not have excellent professional content, then why even bid? Why even go after the opportunity? No, content is no longer king. It is now contrast. Contrast is now king. So if we say that we have a better solution than everybody else, at a glance, our proposal better look like it, feel like it, sound like it, taste like it. I don't care if it's an oral presentation. I don't care if it's a written proposal. It doesn't matter. It better stand out from our competition. So the challenge, of course, is how do we do that? And by the way, this isn't anything that's a shocking surprise to scientists, because if you think about how the brain works, imagine you walk into your living room. In your living room, there's nothing that's changed. Everything looks exactly the same. But imagine instead that you walk into your living room and there is something that's different in there. As soon as we see something that's different, our brain pays closer attention to it. So if we want to stand out from our competition, then we need to make sure that we are contrasting our solution from everybody else. So imagine if you said, hey, Mike, we have the best solution, most innovative solution for you. But I look at your proposal and it looks like something from 2001. And it reads poorly and it's very difficult to understand what your solution is. And the layout is bad and everything about it just screams that it is dated, antiquated, or unprofessional. That's going to be confusing to the evaluator or decision maker or reviewer. So when you think about it, remember, this is evaluators and decision makers are just like you in the sense that their brain works the same way ours does. When they're confused, do you think they say yes or no? So imagine the evaluator is confused. They're like, you say you have an innovative solution, but it certainly doesn't look like it. Do you think they're going to say yes or no? Mallory, what are we seeing?
Mostly no's. One yes, but mostly no's.
Well, the answer, according to research, is, and I understand why you might think yes, but the answer is when the brain is usually confused, it says no. Hey, would you like to buy this brand new thing? I don't know what it is. No, thank you. So when we are faced with conflicting information, we typically say no, thank you. I'd rather not move forward with this decision. Why? It's because we're going with our instinct. Our instinct says, I don't know enough about this, and for that reason, I'm not sure that the solution provider is proficient in this topic because they can't communicate it quickly. I don't trust them, so I'm going to pass until I learn more. And that's the last thing we want to have happen. So the process that Shipley uses, and they do a great job, and my process is almost lockstep with this, is that the first thing we want to do is identify the main point, figure out what the benefit is and the discriminators. When I say benefit, I mean motivators. So there are only three things that motivate human beings: pain, gain, or fear. Now, I don't like fear and pain, so I'm going to stick to gain, and that's going to be benefits. And then point out what we do. Evaluators want to know two things. That's it. What's your solution and why should I pick you? So we should quickly communicate the benefits of our solution, how we give them that, the means by which they get that, and why we are better than our competition. Identify your reader or evaluator. Are they technically proficient? Are they strategic evaluators? Are they someone who has no vested interest in the outcome? I need to know that so that I can make sure that the benefits that I share resonate with them. Remember, we're not creating a graphic for ourselves. We're creating it for someone else. And I need to know who that someone else is. If you don't, ask me in the chat window and I'll tell you, in the questions window, and I'll tell you a really cool technique to handle that. Determine what your customers needs to know in order to achieve or communicate the main point. Select the type of graphic to depict your information. I'm about ready to give you this really cool tool. And then last but not least, sketch and then render your graphic. I recommend sketching because sketching is not limited to your proficiency in a tool. Sketching is only limited by your imagination. Now, please note that I'm showing off a little bit here. I've got mad skills when it comes to computer to proposal graphics, but we could have easily done this as a simplified version. What I'm doing is I'm sketching out how I'm thinking the graphic's going to look, the content that's going to go in there, and then I decide, once I vet that content and graphic type, then I render it. I never, ever, ever start a graphic without knowing what I'm trying to say, the kind of content that's going to go there, and the graphic type or style that I'm going to communicate that information in. Once I've sketched it out and gotten approval, then I can render it. Now, the render can change. The render can absolutely change. But once we do that, once we change the graphic and get it into its final form, it can go into our commercial, government, any proposal that our collateral material that's supporting our capture effort, our sales effort. It doesn't matter. But if we sketch it first, we're not limited to our proficiency in a particular piece of software, and we're less likely to get stuck on a graphic.
Hey, Mike.
So I promised you, yes.
Real quick, just sorry to jump in here, but can you go back to that last one? Because I think there's a question in the chat window here that ties into what you just talked about, how sketching can be a valuable way. There's a question. My biggest challenge while writing highly complex technical proposal sections is to visually and graphically capture highly complex technical solution elements that my engineer described. So do you have a few, and maybe this is coming later, but do you have a few tidbits on how to take highly complex engineering type information and dummy it down, so to speak?
Absolutely. Great question. So my technique for taking highly complex information and making it easier to digest is to quote unquote bucketize it. What I mean is group salient, relevant, or linked similar content into buckets. And yes, I'll show you exactly how to do that later. But what we're doing is we're taking, so let's say we have cloud-based solutions. Well, we put those into a bucket. And then we have, let's say, if it's a process, you just show a process. Most of the time, at an executive summary level, at a high level overview level, we're not talking about our solution tactically, how one would execute it. That's further down in our proposal. Rather, we're introducing how our solution is architected, how all the elements fit together, in which case I'm just going to bucketize or put all of those solution assets into the appropriate buckets and then illustrate it so that we can see how all the assets fit together. And then later in the proposal, I'll show how it's executed. Not that you couldn't do that up front, but the secret is to group similar elements into a category and then visually depict that as showing how they work together as an architected solution. Again, I will show you exactly how we do that later. Brad, did that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah, no, excellent. Good point. And then one other question while we're here.
Yep.
Let's see. I had another question. There's so many of them. Sorry. But there was another one that was relevant to what we're talking about here. Hang with me.
Sure.
Well, we'll come back to it, Mike. But there's so many questions. I'm trying to pull out the ones relevant to what we're talking about. How do you balance? How do you balance too much text and wanting to look competent? And then the other question that was kind of relevant is how do we avoid being too glitzy? So just a couple there, and if you're going to address them later,
very different questions.
Yeah.
Super different questions. All right. So the first one was, how do you make sure you don't have too much content in your graphic? Well, first of all, we have to determine who the evaluator is. Are they technically proficient or not? So that determines the type of wording we're going to use and things like that. The other thing is that usually what I'll do is I will introduce an overview graphic that is simplified, meaning that I don't have all the detail, so that I can contextualize the geeky stuff. So first I say, hey, look, here's all of the solution assets, the key solution assets we have to bear. We have to have advanced AI, we have to have machine learning, we have to have cloud-based solution, we have to have security, we have to have whatever those things are. Introduce them and then say, now let me show you how we're going to do the cloud-based part. And then we start to get into the geeky stuff. So first thing I need to do is set up a big picture view of our solution. And then when I get into the geeky stuff, it contextualizes it. We can use that as kind of like a roadmap for our story that we're telling about how we're going to solve the customer's problem. Again, I'll show you an example of that in a very little bit.
Good.
Number two was you said something about making it not look too glitzy.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get into that coming up in, let's see how many slides. So I think you're asking questions that will be answered coming up. Next slide, I'll answer that question, okay?
Got it.
All right. Great questions. Keep asking the questions. Brad, interject whenever. One of the questions I often get is, how do I pick a graphic type? Well, here's a graphic cheat sheet. I think Mallory typed it into your chat window so that you can download it. It's also part of your handouts. The way it works is every single graphic we will ever make is going to, at its core, be communicating hierarchy, architecture or structure, process or flow, and so forth. Once we figure out what we're communicating, let's say we're communicating relationships. If the information is simple, we would choose from the yellow column. If it's complex, the orange column. And if it's more quantitative, showing amount, value, or time, I'm going to choose a graphic from the blue column. Why is this awesome? Well, because I'm not wasting my time making graphics that won't work. Let's say I made a Venn diagram and it didn't work. Then I made a puzzle graphic and that didn't work. And then I made a funnel graphic and that didn't work. And then I made a pipe graphic and that didn't work. And then finally I made a spiral graphic and that worked. Instead, I can use this graphic cheat sheet to go, oh, I think the spiral graphic is going to work best based on my content, my messaging, and I can see that for inspiration. Now, sometimes people need a little more inspiration. If you do, there are different, let's jump here. I'm going to switch around just a little bit. Sometimes people need a little more inspiration. And if you do, here you go. This is something that you can visit this website, and Mallory has the link to it. Oh, actually shouldn't have the link for the other one, but this is the link to the online graphic cheat sheet, and it has hundreds of examples. Think of it as curated inspiration. So you can look at these graphics and go, oh my goodness, that'll work totally perfectly for what I need to communicate, or not quite it. Let me look at a different graphic type. So these are renders of those little icons you saw in the graphic cheat sheet. So how do you make something not look glitzy? Well, it depends. It depends upon our target audience and how you want to be how you want to be perceived. So I'm going to give you a quick history lesson, and it's going to take me maybe 3 minutes to do it. And when I finish, you're going to go, son of a gun, that makes total sense. At least I hope so. So back in the day when you could make graphics that looked like this, what's called the traditional style, which was photorealistic or three-dimensional, called skeuomorphism, which meant it was trying to look like reality. People said, wow, that's awesome. And then came the advent of smartphones. Now, smartphones had a much smaller user interface, so things had to be simplified, and that gave birth to the flat style. Why am I telling you this? Well, because actually there's one more thing. So so this is around 2015 or 2016, Google said, we love the flat style. We love it. We love it because it's simplified, it's easy to understand, but sometimes we need a little bit of skeuomorphism. So they created something called the material style. The material style takes the best of both styles and then combines them. So basically, when I need some skeuomorphism, let's say I need some three-dimensionality, it allows me to do that, but without a lot of graphic embellishment, which skeuomorphism typically has, a lot of graphic embellishment. So now, why am I telling you this? Because according to research, and this is a rule of thumb, it's not for everybody, if you are over 40 years old, it means you grew up with the traditional style. Meaning that when you were growing up in the industry, you associated with skeuomorphic renders, with photorealistic renders, with a company or organization that had greater resources and typically had a better solution. So you equated that with higher quality solutions. Then if you grew up with the flat style being the most modern thing, you pretty much saw that as the most innovative thing looking at your smartphone device. You associated simplified design or flat style with modern design. But what happens if we have a mixed audience? What happens if we have someone who's 42 years old and someone who's 28 years old? What would we do? Well, according to research, material style appeals to the largest possible audience without making it look glitzy. So let's take a gander at these. This is a skeuomorphic design. If I showed a skeuomorphic design to someone who's under 40, and this is, again, that's not always the case. You often, more than 50% of the time, someone would look at this if they were under 40 and go, wow, that seems like glitzy. It's too glitzy, too much graphic embellishment. However, if I showed this graphic to someone over 40, again, rule of thumb, don't be offended. Please, please, please don't be. If I showed this to someone over 40, they would say, it doesn't pop. It needs to pop. Heck, I could have done this. So what I found is the material design style is the way to appeal to the broadest audience with giving it enough visual embellishment to appeal to someone who liked skeuomorphism because that is skeuomorphic elements, and someone who is used to simplified. There's no graphic embellishment in here. It's clean, it's simple. There's 3D when it's needed. It's 2D when you don't. So the material style is the way to avoid glitzy graphics. So that answers your question, I hope. One of the other things that we typically get, one of the other questions we typically get are about modifying. What graphic types should I look for? Where do I go to get graphics? Well, before I give you that answer, I'm going to tell you that we need to understand there's two basic families of graphic file types. I'm oversimplifying it, but for us, this is perfect. There are vector graphics, and then there are raster graphics. Vector graphics are made up of math. Raster graphics are made up of pixels. So let's take a look. Let's go back here. Let's take a look at the benefits of going vector, because I'm going to recommend that we use vector graphics in as much as humanly possible. Sometimes we need a photograph. Sometimes someone says, hey, do you have a product that does this? Do you have a vehicle? Yes, we do. Here's a picture of it. Son of a gun. You're right. Yes, it is. So what we're doing is taking a look at these graphic types and showing you the benefits of vector versus raster. So first things first, let's say I want to change the look and feel of this graphic. So I'm going to click on the screen face and I'm going to change the color of this graphic to whatever I want. I can easily change the color. As you can see, I can easily change it. Or let's say I want to zoom into the graphic. I want to scale the graphic up. So we're going to zoom into it. If you notice, all the text looks clean and crisp. If I were to zoom back out again and do the same thing to the raster graphic, let's say I want to change the color of it. And as you can see, I can't change the color of it because it's made up of pixels. And let's say I want to zoom into it and get a closer look at that user interface. If I zoom into it, it looks pretty blurry to me. So raster images are resolution dependent, and they are usually much, much bigger as far as file sizes go. So the file size for a raster image could be 10, 20, 30 times the size of a vector image size. How do you know if you have a vector or a raster size image? You look at the file extension. So SVG, EMF, WMF, AI, and EPS are all vector, whereas PNG, JPEG, TIFF, and GIF are raster images. And no, there is no easy, powerful tool to convert raster to vector. I know all the tools, and I have found that they are okay at best, and I would just as soon stick with the raster file when you absolutely need it. So you can't. One of the things I encourage you to do is never, ever, ever, let's see if I can do this real time. This card, let's go back here. Never, ever, ever go to, let's go to the Google. We could go to Bing. We could go wherever we want. Never, ever go to a search engine, type in a word, and go to images, and then use these images in your bid or proposal. Let's do this. Risk avoidance. Let's try this. Risk avoidance. Never grab one of these graphics and throw them in your proposal. Why? Because you're breaking copyright law, number one. Unless they gave you the right to use it, which you really don't know because they can rescind those rights at any point in time. And even if I go to tools, usage rights, and choose something like commercial or other licenses, first of all, the images get worse. But the other thing is any point in time, we can have those, the owner of these images can rescind those rights. So don't go to Google Images and get it, or Bing Images and grab your stuff. You are most likely breaking copyright law. And if this was another workshop, I'd get into all the details about copyright law. Just know that someone else paid for the creation of this. You did not pay for it, yet you used it and benefited from it. It doesn't matter if you're not for profit, it doesn't matter. You are benefiting from it. And so a friend of mine, her daughter used a photograph that a designer created, and the designer sued the daughter for $60,000 and won. Do not grab stuff from the internet and put it in your proposal unless you know for sure it is royalty free. There are websites to go to, like Pixabay. Pixabay is one of the sites I recommend, pixabay.com. And I'm going to type this in for Mallory to share. Pixabay, and then the other one is Pexels. Pexels is another one. And they are free, and they have pretty darn good images. They're pretty darn good images. Now, they do not have a lot of vector images, though, so just know that. It's great for raster. So what do I recommend for creating proposal graphics? Well, my favorite tool is called Build a Graphic, and I'll show you how it works. So I am going to jump onto the Windows machine because the app is a PowerPoint add-in, and it works in conjunction with PowerPoint. So the way the tool works is it's a $99 a year add-in, and you can either build your graphic from scratch or use pre-built graphics. I'm going to walk you through this very quickly. So imagine you have your content. This is your training process that you want to share. You would select your text. Now, this is how you create any freaking graphic, whether you're using Build a Graphic as a resource or whether you're doing it yourself. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what my message is. That's my action caption. Then I'm going to create my content. My content is driven by that message. So I'm going to chunk my text. The tool allows me to chunk the text based on paragraph, sentence, or bullet. The next thing I'm going to do is decide in my proposal graphic if I want to delete any content that I think is going to go into my narrative. I think this is too much to put into a graphic. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that content until I left with something like this. I'm then going to make room for my my visuals. So my visuals are going to augment this content. So what I'm doing is I am I'm doing this. I'm allowing this to include visuals. So the way Build a Graphic works is it analyzes all of the keywords and phrases on your slide. So I'm looking at assess. So I want to show assess. So I'm going to insert graphic, go to assess in my little drop down, and it gives me hundreds of vector images that communicate assessment. So I would find something I think works. I'm going to choose this one, and you can choose anything. Someone said, you know, I have a lot of choices. What do I choose? Anything's better than just a bunch of text if your graphic if your content needs to stand out. One of the questions I often get is, when should I use a graphic? Well, there's only 3 reasons. When your content is too complex to understand textually, when it's a critical success factor, or you want to elicit a very specific emotion very quickly. So I'm going to have this graphic. Again, the graphic is completely vector, so I can change anything about it. So if let's say I want to make this look like a blueprint, maybe I would say, let me give it a blue outline and a white fill, and it looks like a blueprint. It's vector. I can change it any way that I want. So I'm going to flip the image. Let's say I want to flip it this way. I'm going to flip it this way. I'm going to scale it down. Because it is vector-based, I can scale the graphic up or down, and it looks awesome. It always looks awesome. I would repeat that for all of these steps. If I want to be really fancy, I can draw a little circle, and I can place that circle behind these. So in PowerPoint, just like any tool, there are layers. So I can choose here and say send to back. That's one of my options, so I can send the image right to the back, and I could repeat that for all of these. If I want to be even fancier, I could put some arrows in. By the way, this is an old school arrow right here. This is an old school arrow. This, my friends, is a new school arrow. So I just grab that reshape node and I make it so that it's cleaner and simpler. And I would just do that, and I would repeat this step for each one of these until I had something that kind of looks like this. Once you do that, you can then change the font to be something compliant. You can insert this graphic into a Microsoft Word file, InDesign file. If you need your font to be compliant, simply make the graphic the same size it's going to be in your Word file as it is in PowerPoint. So when you copy and paste it, it retains that font size. I can drop it into a different PowerPoint template. I can do whatever I want with it because it's vector-based. I can then, if I want to, oh, here's a cool trick. So here's a graphic. I'm going to launch Word. I'm going to show you this cool trick. So I'm going to launch Word. A lot of times, graphics need to be searchable. So if I create my graphics in a Microsoft Word app, when I copy and paste my graphic in, it is now searchable. So all the text can be searchable by, let's say, an electronic evaluator. So it's a very cool technique to do that. So you have a kit of parts. Let's say you need to make a road graphic. You have these road pieces, all these different road pieces. Let's say you need to make a pipe graphic. You're showing that it's like water flowing through pipes. So you could take these pieces and create your own graphic. You can modify the graphic to match your company's brand standards, or maybe your prospects' brand standards. You can modify them in any way you want because, yay, vector-based graphics are where it's at. But there's another way to use the tool, and that's using it for pre-built graphics. Let me show you what I mean. Let's take that same slide, same exact slide. We have to show 7 steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to go to Build a Graphics tab, Insert Graphic, and I go to 7. So I look for 7 progressive steps that progress. So I could use the step graphic, or I could use any one of these. Any one of these would work, and I'm going to choose this graphic. So I drop the graphic in, and now all I'm going to do is copy the content from my narrative and simply paste it into the graphic. I'm simply copying and pasting it into, or hand typing it in, whatever works, and then dropping it into my PowerPoint slide, my Word document, whatever I want to do. So with this tool, it's great for creating day in the life of graphics. These are isometric graphics. These are great for showing how something will be tactically executed, or you can use it to show how an overview of your process, or an overview of your solution, where the solution elements fit. You can use it for showing a story metaphor, a road metaphor, showing continuous improvement, or risk mitigation, risk avoidance. There's all types of graphics out there that you can use, and they're all completely editable in PowerPoint to do whatever you'd like to do. So the choice is completely up to you. All the graphics are going to be customized by you so that they are unique to your organization. You can see there's tons, maps, and so forth. I think you get the idea. I think you get the idea of what's in here. I'm going to close this down. There are graphics added all the time. I'm going to close this out. All right, suspend this. Any questions, Brad, before I move on to the next thing?
Would you just restate and spell those 2 free sites where some graphics are available?
Absolutely. Mallory, hold on. Did you share those in the chat window as well?
I did. All of the links that you have shared through the whole presentation have been put into that chat window. So you should be able to find them there, link directly to it. So save them, bookmark them, you can find them there.
Absolutely. So Pexels, PEXELS.com. And then the other one is Pixabay, PIXABAY. So Pexels and Pixabay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So one of the things that we got to remember is that we're not creating graphics for us. We're creating them for somebody else. The one thing I jokingly say is that most proposals fail because they're written by the author for the author. We're not creating the proposals for us unless we actually worked at the organization that we're proposing to and we are intimately aware and we're very similar to the people we're proposing to. So I'm going to ask you a question. Let's say we have a process. So the first thing that happens is the request order and the damaged part comes into the CGC repair station. The part is repaired and shipped. Is the part needed? If yes, then the refurbished part goes to the customer within 24 hours. If no, then the refurbished part goes to the warehouse for future needs. Now that is a process diagram. That's a very traditional process diagram. Or I could have said, okay, so the request order and the damaged part comes into the CGC repair station. It is repaired and shipped out. If the part is needed, then I'm going to send it to the client within 24 hours. If the part is not needed, then I'm going to send it to the warehouse for future part needs. So if I were to ask you which graphic is better, your answer should be, it depends. It depends upon the medium I'm going to be sharing it on. Is it an oral presentation? Is it a written presentation? It depends upon my target audience. Are they people that prefer process diagrams, or do they prefer a literal depiction of what's going on? It really depends upon how you want to be seen. So remember, don't create graphics for you. Create it for how you want to be seen, for what you want to cause in the people, in your target audience. That's what the secret is. Do not create graphics for yourself. Here's another example. I see this in proposals all the time. Here's our office expenditures. Wow, that's great. In the world, in a world where we want our information at a glance, this fails miserably to communicate that information. Now, it's better than a simple table. Believe me, that yay, going in the right direction. But even better would be to say, well, what's the point I'm trying to make? And then clean up the information. So the first thing I want to do is remove the clutter, because this is data. In the world of bids and proposals, we want data analysis. So analyze the data, clean up the information. A lot of times the author wants to peacock and say, look at all the research that I did. That's wonderful. So what did you do with that research that helps me, the evaluator, see the benefit in your solution? So what we're going to do is we simplify it as much as we can, take out all the information, and we would be saying, right now, this graphic would say to the evaluator, look, we did a lot of research. So then we have to take it to the next level and say, all right, we did a lot of research, but the only place that matters to you is the San Diego office, because that's where you're located. And here's what we have found. Great, you did a lot of research, and now I'm seeing the data as it pertains to me. This is data analysis. Now let's take it to another level. Let's say the whole point of this chart is that we've noticed a 28% decline on average of all office expenditures. Great job, keep it up. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because we're going in the right direction. So with that in mind, we always want to get to the point. What's our message? Remember, we live in an at-a-glance society. People want their content as quickly and efficiently as humanly possible. So what about page layouts and things like that? With our graphics, integrating it all together, what would something like that look like if it was a winning proposal? Well, here you go. So we have on the left side, a winning proposal. I'm not saying all proposals have to look like this. It depends upon whether it's a federal bid, whether it's a commercial bid, whether it's a state and local bid, whether it's a grant, it depends. It depends, the style depends. But we can all agree that B is not the right way to go. Because we live in an at-a-glance society, it tells me that you didn't take this bid seriously, that you don't have the A-team, you're not one voice, it looks like it was Frankenstein together. I'm going to assume that your solution was Frankenstein together, even if it isn't true. Human beings in an at-a-glance society take shortcuts. We don't have time to weigh every variable. It isn't me telling you this, it is Nobel Prize-winning scientists. Read any book on the topic and it will agree with me and say, yep, we live in an at-a-glance society and that people make decisions very, very quickly, and then they want to back it up with proof and facts. So let's take a look at the winning design. So we look at this graphic, we're seeing a lot of amazing things that make it easier for the evaluator. First of all, we can tell it, even if you don't know where to start, you know where it ends. You know it ends with the customer simplifying tasks, lowering cost 18%, and becoming or remaining the customer center of excellence. And then we can backwards engineer. Well, how do you get there? Well, the first thing that I did is I looked at your mission, your vision, your budget, your needs, all that, and I combined it with our expertise and experience. We would put quantitative or qualitative evidence in there. And then from that, we bucketized our solution to give you an architecture of how we're going to execute your solution. And that fits into cloud security, machine learning. So cloud security, machine learning, and of course, AI. And within there, we put the specific geeky details. And from that, we are now buzzword compliant. We now have automation, transparency, all the things that you said in your RFP that you wanted, we deliver on that. And then the last piece de resistance is the fact that we have flagged what makes us unique. So remember the two things I said that evaluators want. What is your solution? Well, at a 10,000-foot level, this is our solution. Well, why should I pick you? Well, you should pick us because of our experience and expertise, because of this tool, this resource, this solution. That's why you should pick us. Those are the key reasons why we believe we stand out from our competition. Let's see. Here's a quick question that I know Brad got about. And by the way, an infographic. So Brad was talking about the fact that someone asked about infographics. Any graphic that clarifies and or explains is an infographic. This, my friends, is an infographic. Don't be fooled by Googling infographic and think your graphics need to look like that. An infographic is any graphic that clarifies or explains. So do whatever. Sometimes a photograph can be an infographic, just a photograph. For example, I'd like you to pick Mallory up from the airport. Well, Mallory's about this tall with this color hair. Show me a picture and boom, it's an infographic. One of the things I want to reinforce about creating our proposals is you have a choice. You can either stay with your brand or echo your audience's brand. That's really your two main choices. There is a third choice, but we're not getting into that for this workshop. So here's an exercise. On your screen right now, you see 40 brands. At a glance, just looking at these, how many do you recognize? Go ahead and just type it in the chat. Of the 40, at a glance, how many do you recognize? When you skim across this, do you say, I remember though? Yeah, oh yeah, I know that, yep. Tell me how many, and then Mallory, let me know how many you're seeing.
Pretty much everyone is saying all of them are recognizable.
Absolutely. So if the reason why we recognize them is because at a glance, we are seeing something we've seen before. The secret of good marketing and branding is consistency. So let's take a look at this one. Of these colors, A, B, C, D, which is Home Depot's color? A, B, C, or D? What do you think, Mallory?
Definitely A.
I see. What is it? Anybody else say anything in chat?
Got one D and the rest are A's.
Got it. Alrighty. So it is A, and that's because we're exposed to the brand very, very often. The more we're exposed to the brand, the more we recognize it, the more we trust the brand. So here's another question. What parcel delivery company comes to mind when you see the color brown? When you see this color on your screen, what parcel delivery company comes to mind? Go ahead and type it in the chat.
I just want you to know, Mike, that someone from Germany in this webinar said they don't have Home Depot in Germany.
Well, apparently not, or they wouldn't have said B. No worries, no worries.
No,
And
I
so
know. It's just funny. It's good.
Yes, and good on you for being here from outside the U.S. I am so very happy that you joined us.
Yeah, we've got several. It's good.
So what are you seeing, Mallory?
Pretty much all UPS, some other snarky comments, trying to say some other companies.
Fair enough, fair enough. So the reason why I'm saying and doing all of this is because I'm telling you to own your freaking brand. Own your colors. If you want to be efficient in creating proposals, my recommendation is use your organization's brand. If, however, your brand is not recognizable and you want to increase the likelihood that you win the bid, then you're going to use your customer's brand. Why? Because we trust that which is familiar. Familiarity breeds trust. So if they are very familiar with their brand, then I'm going to use their brand to hold a mirror up to them so that they instantly build trust. And by the way, folks, trust is the closest thing to a silver bullet in proposals. No trust, no sale. So my recommendation is use your brand if they know it. If they don't, then go ahead and use your customer's brand. If not, there's other ways to go, but again, not for this workshop. So I'm going to turn this back over to the great Mr. Brad so that he can talk to you about action captions. Mallory, if you don't mind.
Mike, I just want to say, this is so powerful what you've just done, and um, more. And I know you see this in your work. We see it more and more opportunities to compete for work, bids, proposals are moving more and more toward briefings, whether virtual or in person, PowerPoint, and it's just so it's getting to be more important, not less. The
It
visual
is
appeal.
absolutely true. Absolutely, Brad.
One question, Mike, and then I'll continue here. But someone asked if the build a graphic only works within PowerPoint.
Yeah, no, there's another option that you can get just the library of assets. So the graphics are PowerPoint native only because most people aren't Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator experts. But just know that if you are Adobe Illustrator, for example, you can copy and paste the content from PowerPoint into Illustrator. Why? Because they're all vector assets. So they vector works no matter what tool you're using.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. All right. Just to put kind of a bow on graphics, I mentioned earlier that graphics without a caption are often incomplete. You notice that on some of Mike's graphic, he included an action caption. The reason we do this is we're trying to help the evaluator draw a conclusion. The graphic does part of it, but the caption can reinforce it. Captions should be full sentences but be succinct. They should help the graphic stand alone so they don't have to go back up into the text to reread something. And we encourage you to place the caption, the action caption, directly below the graphic. And we recommend 3 parts to a caption: a figure number that links to the flow of the section or the volume of the proposal, a title, and then the supporting text. And again, succinct is the key here. So, for example, here's a simple one. There's a figure number, there's a short title, and there's a standalone supporting text. So let the title, if you want, if it can focus on a benefit, a hot button, a key issue, fantastic. But this should be a real selling point. Team productivity is lower at the end of the week due to reduced demand. Well, how does that link to the solution? Make sure the customer can capture that. So when we're doing captions, we can create a great graphic, but when we're doing captions, we can be lazy and just give them something like this. We could be a little more responsive, and give them an explanation of what this organizational chart is, or we can really try to be compelling. And even in our title, the customer, the evaluator, is going to know, wow, a proven team organization that helps us reduce our risk. Okay, this part of our proposal is talking about helping the customer reduce risk. Well, there it is. And they're going to see it and they're not going to miss it. It's powerful. So in summary, just think of these items and then we'll take a few questions. Are our graphics customer focused on the customer? Do they supplement the text? Can the evaluator interpret the graphic without referring back into the text? Can the customer grasp the primary objective? And should it even be included? in some of our proposal reviews, someone ought to be assigned, is this graphic right? I mean, does it really need to be there? Does it add value? Is it a distraction? So those are some things we ought to be thinking about. And then Mike gave us some really good resources. Here are some other ones to consider. And Mike, thank you for sharing some of the other ones that we can go to. So look what's out there. Let's make sure we're respecting copyright rules and regulations. And this is Mike's organization. He's published a lot. The Build a Graphic is an awesome tool. Billion Dollar Graphics, the graphics cheat sheet, that's in your handouts. Please download it. Go to Mike's website, and I'm not trying to be promotional here. I'm just trying to add value to what we do as business winning professionals. So, Mike, thank you for that. Let's go now and just see if there's some questions. Mallory, there are a ton of questions. Have you picked out two or three that maybe we can address?
So we didn't specifically mention client logos. How do you recommend using those?
I can tell you what the law says, if that helps.
I think it helps.
Yeah, so if you're doing, let's say, a government bid, most law agencies around the world forbid or discourage use of their logos because it assumes endorsement. So rule of thumb is don't do it. Now, do people do it? Yes. Do they get in trouble? Rarely. I do know for a fact that I have heard of government agencies disqualifying people because they use the logo, but it's happened in my 20 years of doing this maybe twice. So just recognize that. And as far as using logos from other organizations, absolutely get approval first is the rule of thumb, because the logo, if it's a commercial company, is copywritten, it's owned, it's trademarked. You do not have the right to use it without their permission. Do people do it? Of course they do. So know that if you want to follow the letter of the law, do not use their logos. Question about using our logo, was that the question, Mallory, or using someone else's logo?
I believe using someone else's logo.
Yep. Bottom line is, according to the law, you shouldn't use it. That's the if you want to be safe, that's the way to go. Do people do it? Mm-hmm. They sure do.
So in terms of, and this is also a question I have as well, but this was just asked. So in terms of putting, a customer logo in our proposals in an effort to make it customer focused, if we don't alter it in any way, how do you feel about that?
Law says you can't do it. There's no room for interpretation. It's the law. I mean, as soon as you put the logo in there, it assumes endorsement, that the company endorses it. So they said, no, you don't. Even a government agency won't let you do it. Now, do people do it? They sure do. Is your organization going to continue to do it, because you've done it for years? They sure will. So just know that the likelihood that you're going to get in trouble is almost zero. But I certainly wouldn't want to be the poster child for, oops, we got sued or got disqualified because of it.
Certainly. Thank you.
Sure.
Coming through some more questions here. So one question we did get asked a couple of times. So at what point should you use a graphic artist instead of trying to create a graphic yourself, if you are not a graphic artist?
Brad, you want this one, or do you want me to do it?
Well, I think the pat answer is it depends on the customer. How we've got to understand how the customer would prefer to receive this information, and then just our bandwidth internally as an organization. It's worth it to spend a little money to get a professional to do it if this is a must-win strategic deal, as opposed to trying to cobble something together that looks half-baked and put it in a proposal. I just say it again, graphics, visuals are becoming more relevant and more important, not less. Mike, I assume you'd kind of agree with that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So don't let your budget dissuade you from hiring a professional graphics support person on high value strategic deals.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We are about out of time, so thank you to everyone who submitted questions.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining. Mike, especially, this is such a great topic. You do so well. Your energy, your knowledge of the topic, and please, everyone, I hope you'll join us in future. Here's Mike's information. Please, I think I know he welcomes you to reach out, connect with him. And thanks for your time and investment in your time today. Mike, thanks. Mallory, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here and making time. I know you're busy.
Take care.
Bye, Brad. Bye, Mallory.